This is All the Things with Michelle Wolfe. All right, so today I am joined by Michael Author, Sexual Guide for Men and Dream Technologist. Can you explain a little bit about that?
My journey into doing something other than what I started out doing in life, which is being a college English professor, has taken me to some really strange places. And among those places has been supporting men who desire to experience more from their sexuality. Um, Either they just know that more is possible, or they are in relationships that have the sexuality, the spark has kind of tapered off, or perhaps they experience some sort of challenge such as premature ejaculation or what have you. So
So it
I
could be
support.
struggles or like when you say more, it could be like looking for more connection, more
Yeah, so
deeper experience.
I have a neo-tantric background, so that's one of the skill sets that I use. It's very helpful for that. But then there was a period of time where it felt like for me as a person, my work needed to branch out and deepen. And at around that time, and not just my work, me, I started having a series of, I would call them particularly notable dreams. I began to listen to them, and it totally shifted my life. So I asked myself, what did I do in this situation? And how could I offer something as I guess, a tribute to the power that those dreams had had in my life, and kind of bring other people along for the ride. And I created the Dreaming Society, which is the work that I do with dreams. So I work with men and I work with dreams.
Yeah. And I mean, I want to say as part of, I don't know, I'll call myself a member. Being a part of that was really, I mean, I'm fascinated by dream world anyway, and all that we receive in that time, all that's integrated, even just from a biological standpoint, like that's the time that our processor is organizing itself and doing all the things that it needs to do to set us up right for the next day. It's like, but it's also receiving all this information that we maybe can't be receiving in our waking life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So doing that work was amazing.
There are a number of theories about what we're doing when we're dreaming. I have a tendency to believe that all of them are true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've created a little ebook to educate people about the purpose of dreaming that actually is not available on my website yet, but I'm going to put up pretty soon. So,
Okay, I was just gonna ask. I'd
yeah.
like to read that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make sure you get it.
Thank you. Because I'm fascinated by Dream World, and that's why I joined. Because and just the depth of the conversations that we had during that time, and also I love. I mean, there's so many places we could go into that, but like when you connect with a group of people, like how that amplifies the experience and deepens it for all
Absolutely.
of us. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we have this tendency to approach dreaming as if it is psychological and deeply personal. And I tend to believe that the function of dreaming is much more social than we like to give it credit for, even though we're the only ones that have our dreams, right? Like nobody else can see our dreams. I mean, pretty soon they should be able to be extracted by computers, but we're not there yet. um,
But have you ever
but
had a dream experience where like you you have a dream and it's very vivid and you describe it to somebody else and they're like, "Oh my God, like I had a very similar dream with same textures, noticing different pieces of the puzzle." And whether that's our minds wanting to like put it together and make it make sense or not, Like, I don't know. I feel like you can't, we have to
Yeah, well, I
remember
mean,
that.
it's not only that, in our dreams, we're visited by the deceased.
Hmm.
We have dreams that involve people in our life.
Hmm.
We can journey backwards in time to our childhood home, like all sorts of things can happen in a dream.
Yeah.
And there's a question, some people like to think of dreaming as simply mental detritus. It is the brain's way of organizing and retrieving, organizing information for later retrieval and or
Hmm.
processing it.
It's
But
like a reconfig, because I do think of our brains as like computer processors.
but have you ever had a dream that seemed so vivid that you could swear that it was a place that
Oh,
really
sure.
existed?
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, and the nature of consciousness is such that to this day, no one can explain why consciousness exists or even why life exists, right? It's inexplicable. And the phenomenon of consciousness is so much more than the mechanics that
Mm,
we can, if we were to dissect the brain and look at
sure.
all of its workings and what have you, it's so much more than that. It's almost like consciousness exists on multiple levels at once, and it is emergent. So when I say that
Yeah.
it's emergent, it means that it's like it's greater than the sum of its parts and it cannot be reduced to the sum of its parts.
Hmm.
Um, so there is a question if there is some plane of reality in which what we dream is real.
Yeah.
The Toltecs believed that uh, this body that we experience is the illusion,
Well, I
and
was just
that
gonna say, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and that our dreaming body was the real thing, and that many of their practices sought to bridge the gap between
Mm,
the waking world and the dream world.
yes. Well, right, because sometimes, sometimes like I'll look at life and I'll be like, is this the dream? And in my dreaming, is that the waking world? Like what, like you can kind
Yeah.
of turn it on its head, because it begs the question of what's real, and then that starts to like expand into this bigger thing. And that's when things like, psychedelics and um tools to help us get to different states within ourselves, can be
Mhm.
useful. So,
Absolutely. I think they're related phenomenon, but not
hmm,
the same.
yeah,
Obviously, psychedelic journeying and dreaming. I do believe that um, they can serve many of the same functions, and people who are interested in one are often interested in the other.
yeah, they're like, I feel like they're a jumping off or an access point, kind of how I see it sometimes for
Mhm.
people who, I mean, because I know people who will be like, I don't ever dream, you
Mhm.
know.
I have
So,
something to say about that. If somebody tells me that they never dream, um, I will right away receive the information that that person is so far off of their joy and purpose in life that their dreams have abandoned them because they have abandoned their dreams.
mm, well,
Does
that's
that make
definitely it.
sense?
I can see why you would say that. I have another theory, which is, I mean, I can see that, and I'm curious if, like, I wonder if some of those people, if the dreams that they're having are so, like, the stuff that they're working through, say it's somebody that, like, they struggle with really suppressing rage. So, like, I wonder if in their dreams they're being like really violent, and they're like hurting people in ways that, and that's like a way for their mind and body to process that. But then to remember that would be like harmful for their psyche. So I don't know if, sometimes I wonder if that's like a protective mechanism.
So one of the theorized purposes for dreaming is of uh, an early threat detection system.
Mm.
So a study was done where a number of children were surveyed about their dreams, and the ones that grew up in a troubled or violent household had a prevalence rate of nightmares that was 3 times higher than those who did not. Additionally, you may notice that you have dreams about things like your teeth falling out or being shot, or I frequently have dreams about a nuclear holocaust.
Mm.
And one of the theories is that your dreams are meant to show you before it becomes a threat in the real world, what you should be paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But in these, like, but for these people, they're the perpetrator. And this is just my theory. Like, would you want to remember that you perhaps beat somebody so badly that their face was gone? And that's the dream that you had. You know what I mean? So maybe that's,
so, I mean, I will say that if somebody has done something like, say they're a veteran, or and they'd killed people in a war, or somehow they had a really violent exchange where they inflicted harm upon someone else, the psyche can split and make it so that those memories are suppressed. Um, but I think what you're speaking to there is a fringe case.
yeah,
The
sure.
vast majority of individuals, if they have dreams that have difficult content, um, I mean, they're likely going to remember them, because that's how uh, like our dreams exist to show us those parts of ourselves that we don't want to
Mm-hmm.
see. A full 2/3 of all dreaming is emotionally challenging or difficult. So our dreams are not here to be pleasant guides. They're here to help us look at our
Yeah.
suppressed desires,
Hard
our
stuff.
hidden motivations, our potential for evil, all sorts of different things our dreams can show us if we're listening.
Yeah.
But the reason why I say that if someone's not dreaming, that they're likely very disconnected from their life path and their truth, is that I have yet to encounter someone who is working a job that they really love. It has a home life that they really love, feels like they are totally on purpose in life, doing everything that they want, and doesn't dream.
Well,
Um,
and it begs the question of like, even, I'm all about language. So when you say, I never have dreams, think about what you're saying. Like what language, what you just said. I never have dreams. You don't have dreams? What dreams do you have for yourself? Like I get
exactly.
curious about that because it
And of
matters.
course, this is an equivocation because there are two meanings of the word dream. One is our
Mm-hmm.
dreams at night, and one is
Right.
like our vision for the
Aspiration.
future.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that perhaps because it's paired linguistically, it serves as an interesting metaphor for both, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you are not having dreams at night, I have found it to be usually true that one of two things are happening. Either you're smoking too much weed, or because weed can eat dreams,
Yeah.
or you are very
Does
disconnected.
alcohol have the same effect?
No,
Okay.
no, it does not. Um, that can have you have a different quality of dream, but doesn't
Yeah.
remove them.
Okay.
Um, anyway, so that's what I have to say
Jumped
about
right
that.
into dreams.
Yeah,
I do want to talk about your men's work because that's something, I mean, I feel like I sort of discovered you what in like 2018, 2017. And you were talking
yeah,
a lot about like healthy sexuality and relationships, and you were doing men's work then too. And your
yeah.
writing and the way that you describe it is what, I always tell you I love your mind, and 'cause I just really appreciate the way that you're able to articulate an emotional experience. So,
Well, thank you.
mhm.
So yeah, I stumbled into men's work. It was kind of at the end of a very difficult road for me. Um, I had, without telling the whole story, it's just a horrible life disaster. And I stumbled into men's work to help me rebuild my confidence and rebuild myself, and it worked. Um, so that's why I'm doing it.
I think it always
My
starts off, right? Our most of our the things that we offer to the world are the things that we use to heal ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think that the attitude that many men have towards other men, particularly surrounding relationships and sexuality, can be extremely toxic or negative, right? Like, there's a sense of competition, a sense of posturing, a sense of the only times that men will often talk about sex is when it's for the purposes of bragging, or making jokes,
Yeah.
right? That's when men talk about sex typically. So having a space where men can get together and really focus on their sexual expression and eliminate that sense of fear and competition and
Shame.
show up in mutual support of each other is really valuable. Most men's work that I've come across, it you know sex is kind of kept out of it a lot of times. And one thing that I've noticed about the things that we can't speak about or don't speak about or don't focus on is that they have a tendency to then run the show behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
working with men.
yes, and it makes me sad that this is something so primal to who we are. We are
Absolutely.
sentient sexual beings, and there's no shame in that. But removing that shame element from sex, I mean, sex is still very much linked. Like they're still linked. There's a lot of shame that I think over
Yes.
time, like I'm glad, like through the movements of, people owning themselves and their sexuality more. Like I think I'm hoping that
Yeah.
we're moving away from that, but it's still present.
I mean, for example, there's one client that I have in my current men's program, Depth Sexuality, who had been in and still actually is in a marriage of 20 plus years. And for more than 10 of those years, the relationship had been utterly sexless.
Oh,
And there was a sense that this man he didn't have anyone to talk to about it. Where there was no opportunity to have external reflection, the patterns just stagnated.
yeah.
And since joining Depth Sexuality, he's had major awakenings and movement in his life as a result. And it's a beautiful thing to
Oh,
see.
I love that because that's so freeing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, all we need a lot of times is just for that space to be held for us, and then we just blossom, where once there was constriction or restriction or fear, that transmutes into possibility.
That's awesome. That makes me so, I mean, and I know that a lot of people, especially as you get older, like they just kind of accept it that like, oh, it just goes away. And I guess if you're okay with that, that's okay. But are you really? And if you're not, like, how can you? Because I feel like it just kind of like, I feel like it just builds a wall around you.
Oh yeah, our sex and our heart are shut down. It's what is the word? It's just life. It's life draining.
Yeah.
We only get this life in this body. One thing I like to say is, life is too short for bad sex.
Well,
It
because
is.
it is our life force creation
Yeah.
energy. So if
Hmm.
that's not being fed, or that's not that, you know, and as a creative, like that's like we, you know, creative people tend to have a big life force creative energy. We have to direct that somewhere. And it doesn't always have to be, I mean, I've learned for myself being, I would call myself a highly sexual person. I like having sex. It's a very connective, intimate, sharing experience for me. It's deep, I don't
Hmm.
engage like that very easily. Um, and that energy can be directed into, these things. Like I direct it into my podcast, I put it into my book, I put it into my writing, like into my art, because it's that creative expression.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'll tell you what, like directing it into those things is a lot more productive than
yes,
directing it into a toxic relationship, for
yes,
example. Yeah.
absolutely. That's it right there. Which in and of itself, I think is a big lesson for people.
Hmm.
And if you find yourself like really struggling, to accomplish things, like finding those ways that you can direct that energy actually makes it grow, is what I've experienced,
Hmm.
but in healthy ways.
Yes. And one of the main shifts that I help men really integrate in depth sexuality is one way to term it is sexual self-sourcing. So a lot of times, and you see this in the most toxic male expressions, in the sense that oftentimes men will make women or a woman responsible for their sexuality or their sexual pleasure or gratification. And more often than not, in men, it's a little more subdued than like, you know, I have a boner, you need to take care of it, it's your responsibility, right? Like, it's usually a little more subdued than that. And it can be a very simple thing of uh, only feeling turned on or excited or capable of running sexual energy when a woman is present.
Yeah.
And outside of that, they just kind of, are all in their heads, going about their day, making changes in the world. In depth sexuality, we begin to access our sexual energy just with ourselves. So we start feeling sexy. And that provides the conditions to more fruitfully bring a woman into that.
And when you say when a woman is present, you mean like actually present in the moment
Uh,
with you, right? Like not just physical presence. I know you know, but I want to
yeah.
be I want to be
Yes.
clear for
Yes.
anybody listening.
When you are interfacing with a feminine energy.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, okay.
I mean, that could be messaging, it could be in any number of ways, but yes, female attention. Um, and that creates, you know, all sorts of potentially negative environments, such as um, often, I mean, it even gets to the point where people who are in long-term relationships and they, if they don't have access to their own sexual energy outside of their connection with their partner, it ends up becoming very unattractive.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
because they will often unintentionally grasp,
Mm-hmm.
right,
Well, you can't
at
help it because you've
energy.
made somebody responsible for that thing. Um,
Yes.
and it's not, it really is an energy that comes within you that's your responsibility to manage for yourself. Um, yeah.
Yep.
And I guess
Um,
I want to be clear, like we're not limiting this to just men and women in sexual
no,
relationships.
I mean, I'm bisexual. I work with men who are all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I use that heteronormative language simply because the bulk of my clients
Mm-hmm.
are heterosexual. And I have to make a choice about the language that I use.
Yeah.
Um, and it will turn off, no matter what you say, it's going to turn somebody off.
Yeah, sure.
But I like to just say what I say and then make a disclaimer.
Well, and it applies. Yeah. So when we're talking, I
Yeah.
get it. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah. And so sometimes you can say, instead of woman, right, you could say receptive partner.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would say that my work is for anybody who identifies primarily as the giving partner, right? So male, masculine energy. So I have on occasion worked with gay men or trans folks. And actually, the possession of a physical penis does not matter so much for integrating these energetics. Um,
So it is a
it,
penetrative
yeah,
energy, right? Like we
yes,
can agree on that.
yeah, yeah. Masculine energy it's both penetrative and it's holding,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is form.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is so it's yeah, piercing and containing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas feminine energy flows and fills up the space, right?
And we talked
Moving
about,
in Shakti.
yeah, and it allow and you and men holding that space allows us to like, sort of blossom into that and let go, surrender, into the flow of the experience, and we can let go in ourselves, and you know, so one of the things that we had talked about in one of our last conversations was like people who are in long-term relationships and keeping that intimacy and passion, particularly between them, alive,
Mm-hmm.
because it's so easy after you've been with somebody for years, you know what works. Like you can really, I think, get lost in the mechanics of the experience and not be with each other, and like
Yeah,
that it's important to maintain that, like that connection. That intimacy is more than just getting it done. So
absolutely. Yeah, intimacy is much more than just physical sex, right?
but I
In
think so many
relation,
people do, they sort of default to that. Would you agree?
yes, yeah, absolutely. Um, but one of the main issues that occurs in long-term relationships is that the conversation becomes about like how much sex we're having, who's initiating, what it looks like, those sorts of things, when really the relationship would probably benefit from some deeper questions, because especially if you're cohabitating, there can be a tendency to just take who the other person is for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I believe that it is a need of all of us for growth and change, and uh, to not put too fine a note on it, our society squashes that, right? We are fed the idea that, um, you know, we live and work and exist in one same place all the time, and we sometimes maybe take vacations or trips outward, but that we should be able to live comfortably in a box with one other person, and share meals together every single night, and that we should be able to just watch Netflix and have that occupy our time until such point that we become too old and need to be placed into convalescent homes. And I will say that modern society has put especially couples in situations that are not ideal for
Mm-hmm.
thriving. So in order to contradict that, countermand that, to shift things, you need to go out of your way to keep things fresh and remember that you are not the same person, and you shouldn't try to be the same person.
But and I think that's why, they talk about like novel experiences in relationships
Mhm.
are really important. They heighten things. It puts you both in a situation where, you're kind of confronting an experience, a new experience together. And then that
Mhm.
gets, you get to see and learn more about yourself and that person in those moments. And so I think that couples who, stay together for long periods of time and are able to maintain that, having those experiences, I think is really important and beneficial.
Yeah, novelty, that can be helpful. Sometimes novelty, however, can become a trap, you know?
Yeah, sure. I think
Um,
anything can though. I really like, I think we as humans, we always sort of find a way to take something to an extreme.
mhm.
So, sure. Like
Yeah,
that can be a
absolutely.
form of escapism too. So, yeah.
But I mean, beyond that, I think that one of the things that really keeps sex, especially fresh, is not so much, new positions and introducing new toys and
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of like taking trips and getting outside your comfort
okay,
zone and
yeah,
like getting out of that box, right? The house. Like, so
hmm,
actually doing things that are, like trying challenges. Uh, yeah.
yes, yeah. I suppose we're talking about two different things here.
Yeah. Different
I'm
forms
talking
of
about
novelty.
keeping relationships fresh. Both are important.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's what I got.
What else can we talk about? I wanted to talk about friendships and men and women friendships in particular.
Oh
Because
yes.
this topic got brought up for me, and I'm very passionate about this because I do have such wonderful men in my life, and you're one of
Hmm.
them. And thank
Oh, thank
you
you.
for being one of them. I appreciate you very much. Um, I appreciate your perspective and the way that you hold space for me in this very beautiful way.
Hmm. Oh,
Um,
thank you.
I was this guy who was an influencer, and I like his content, and he puts stuff out there that talks about the hormonal and biological experience that men go through in relationships, and trying to like understand, because we are different creatures. We are. We're made differently, we operate differently, hormonally, we function differently. But he
Absolutely.
was like really giving like a hard time to anybody that entertains a friendship with someone of the opposite sex. And he was talking about how those men, because men are in his mind, like you're chasing and you get the thing, and if you don't get the thing, if you're being friends, then you're settling and you're a weak man. And then any woman that's entertaining you is entertaining a weak man. And I was like, gosh, that makes me like, that hurts my heart to hear that, because actually I think it takes a strong man to be able to maintain a friendship in a platonic way, especially if there's attraction there. So
Yeah.
I totally
So
challenge the idea of that.
the one of the more toxic things that I've heard that everyone seems to agree with is women can't be friends with men that they're attracted to, just friends. Women can't. And that men will be friends with women that they're attracted to because the man is like, um, well, this thing that I really want isn't available, but I'll settle for friendship. Whereas this person said that she's attracted to won't have him, will not maintain that friendship, and that uh, anyway, that was the thing that was said,
Mm.
and I think that is just incredibly toxic, because it reduces male female interactions into potential for into the potential for sexual
Hmm.
interaction.
Yeah, it takes everything down to that level, which I understand
Hmm.
it is a primal need, but it isn't everything, and we are conscious beings, and so much of our interaction and how we benefit each other is beyond just that.
Yeah, absolutely. I am friends with a large number of people that are of the female persuasion, and some of them I am attracted to, and some of them I am not.
Mhm.
And it does not influence my availability for friendship one way or the other,
Yeah,
you know?
same, same. And
Um,
actually, I was surprised to hear you say you shared that about what you heard was toxic. I would have thought it would have been the other way around, that women would be the ones that were more likely to be able to entertain and maintain those relationships. And so I'm like, wow, that's surprising to hear that. And see what it does? It just like generalizes us and our ability to show up in relationship with genuine love and care.
I mean, it places men in the position of beggars and puts women in the position of like, oh, they have all the power, and so if they can't
Yes.
have the power, then they're kind of petty about it, right? And I just think that's gross.
And then it also, deteriorates the notion that, because there was like, he was like, and you shouldn't maintain any relationship with your exes. And I just disagree. And I actually feel like it's a red flag. It is a red flag to me if I'm dating somebody and he doesn't have any good relationship with any of his exes. Like, that's why. Um, so there's that. But then it's like, what does that say to people who are in, I'm in a co-parenting relationship with my ex, and we have a beautiful friendship. Like, I'm so grateful. Like, and it's very real, so I think he's such a strong man. I look at him and I have gained more respect for him as my friend in this phase of our lives, because of his ability to be my genuine friend. So it's like, I just hate the idea that people would, and so many people follow this guy, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. So
Yeah, well, I mean, it falls into the category of the more polarizing something is on social media, the more attention it gets.
sure.
And so oftentimes influencers just go out of their way to say some just absolute bullshit.
Outlandish.
So
Yeah.
so they get more eyeballs on them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, he has a
and
tendency to do that, and I can tell he likes it. He can be a little mean sometimes too. But he looks at that as very strong masculine energy. So,
I mean, sure.
yeah, right? I mean,
I don't think that has much to do with strong masculine energy. That has to do with the energy of being an asshole.
well, and
Um,
actually I was, because I am very aware of how we can project. So I'm listening to him talk about all these quote unquote weak men, and I'm like, maybe he's really just talking about himself.
almost
So,
always. Yeah.
yeah.
So I found that people who are obsessed with appearing strong and with the way that they're received are doing it as like a compensation pattern for not just like not feeling okay otherwise
Yeah.
within who they are. So it's a mask and it's a performance.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. We all have our things.
I don't really feel like I know somebody until I see them and what they're like in a relationship, over the long term. So there's like all these people online who present these images, but then oftentimes you will notice when they get into a relationship, like oftentimes things blow up and they blow up because a relationship shows to you who you really are,
It's an
not who you
amplifier. Yeah.
yeah, not who you pretend to be.
Hmm.
And so
Well, it's an
when
opportunity I look at as like a way you're facing yourself in that
yeah,
reflection, in that mirror that somebody's holding for you.
yeah, absolutely. So I mean, if I had any attachment to being right or appearing strong or having all that shit together, I would not be a good candidate for relationship. Because frankly, you need the attitude of humility um, in a healthy long-term relationship. You can, pretend to be the strong man only up to a certain point. but like your partner is going to require more from you than that.
Well, I always look at relationship as like a meeting at the table. I think of it
Mm.
in terms of like the relationship table, like what we're bringing. Because there's you and there's the other person, or it could be other people, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
relationships can be more
Sure.
than just one and the other.
Yeah. I was
Although
poly for 11 years.
those relationships are incredibly challenging sometimes because of the amount of communication that you need in a healthy relationship is already right a thing, and then when you add more
Mm-hmm.
people it just adds layers of you know but people do it, and I think it can be done very thoughtfully and very real.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
but yeah.
For those of you who don't know, I ran a sex cult and a polyamorous education business for a few years, and that actually is where we first connected.
It is, yeah.
Um, yeah, that was that was.
Because
A
I
f-
was exploring the idea of, I'm such an openly loving person, and
mhm.
I have a deep capacity for like this unconditional love, and so I do understand people that can love more than one person and be in
Mhm.
love with more than one person. That does
Mhm.
make sense to me, but I had to I didn't actually ever like get into that, but I just sort of observed everybody else around me, and I think for me, I do really like having that sort of one person that feels like my own. There's
Mhm.
something about that to me that's very romantic. And
For quite some time, my ideal was having two of those people.
mhm.
Um, and it was a wonderful, beautiful idea in theory, but I like to think that if you are in that the healthiest non-monogamous relationships are the ones that organically unfold, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that when I was poly, there was a lot of times where I was poly on principle,
Mm.
but not just because it was what was organically, healthfully flowing into my life.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Um, and I now no longer feel the desire or need for that.
And that's what,
Um,
yeah, like maybe you
yeah.
just evolved as a person and your needs changed, right? Like, so, and also life is about experimentation. I was just talking about this today with my ex. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about relationships, and I was like, I do kind of, I'm like, I'm going to test that theory. Like, I'm looking at this as a theory right now. And I'm like, it is kind of like that. Like, you kind of have this idea of like, okay, well, I'm going to see what happens here. I'm going to let this unfold. And then I'm going to see how I feel about it. So, right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and we can make adjustments along the way. So,
We absolutely can.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think the phrasing I usually like to use is our relational template grows, shifts, and
Mm,
changes over time.
hmm. I like that.
And that if it has not grown, shifted, or changed over time, there's likely something that we're hiding from or avoiding. You know what I
Say
mean?
more about that.
So,
Like, say I'm a heterosexual man and I just heard you say that, and I never have wanted to like explore anything else.
well, essentially, I'm not saying that everyone needs to be polyamorous. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if our relational template, which means how we go about um, creating, uh, building,
Hmm.
and sustaining relationships does not grow, shift, and change over
Got
time,
it.
then
Got
there's
it.
something that we are avoiding. And oftentimes, people do this thing where they will go on to dating apps and they'll just like meet up with people and um, they'll have a list of criteria that they're kind of looking for. And but you will see that they'll just play out the same patterns again and again and again and again.
Hmm.
And I know everyone has a friend like this, where you talk with them and they relate their most recent flavor of the week experience to you. And over time, you just start making these data points and you just notice like, oh shit, they just keep attracting the same situations or the same person over and over and over again. And at a certain point, you got to stop attributing it to the other people and start attributing it to the person who's having the experience.
Yeah. I think it's
So
hard for people to see that, and then it's easier to observe that from the outside because it's like, oh, this is a new person. This feels like a different experience, but it's similar themes, you know, and those are the things to pay attention to. Like, oh, I've been here before. I'm hearing myself say this again. I feel like I said this before, and like paying attention and catching yourself in that.
So where does that leave us? Friendships, relationships, polyamory, dreams.
What do you want to leave people with? What do you have coming up?
Okay, so the first thing that's coming up is I have a Dreaming Society retreat called the Beginning. It's a Dreaming Society retreat called The Beginning.
Okay.
And that is in North Carolina at a beautiful sanctuary in the mountains. And it is intended to be for folks who are interested in cultivating a conscious dreamwork practice and a sense of a new beginning for themselves in their lives. So a little bit of the backstory here is that I ran the Dreaming Society for about 2 years. And then I realized that it needed some work. Like the beginning retreat marks the return of the Dreaming Society. So
nice.
If it is an absolutely gorgeous property, the event itself is going to be expansive. And I'm really looking forward to bringing a group of people to Mountain Light Sanctuary for this. So that's the first thing. Are you going to have that on
your website, or you'll share more about that?
Yeah, so you can find that all of the information on WTFDYW.com. That is whatthefuckdoyouwant.com.
I'll put it in I'll put it in the description when I share.
And that contains like all my stuff. The other thing is I'm currently running a round of depth sexuality for men, but I'm going to be running another one this upcoming fall. Okay. So I'm thinking October or November is probably what it's going to look like. I haven't set the start date yet, but that's for men who want to dive into their own sexuality to see what is possible to create, full body energetic orgasms, achieve ejaculatory choice, and learn, I would say, like neo-tantric secrets to creating more powerful sexual experiences for yourself and with your partner.
I love that.
So that's what I'm up to. That's what I got going on. Otherwise, you can just connect with me on Facebook, Michael Author.
Okay. I will share those things when I share this. Thank you so much for talking with me about all these things.
So welcome.
And I just appreciate you. So.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to be on with you.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of All the Things.